30. Hey everyone, we're doing the third live Chai Talk Substack, and I brought my friend Mary Trump. And the big topic for this Chai Talk is Donald Trump, an agent of chaos
Hmm.
and self-destruction, and how his personality and his appetites will bring about so much pain and ruin for America, and what we can and should do to fight back. And I've brought Mary because, believe it or not, Mary knows Donald, unfortunately. She has spent time with Donald, unfortunately, and she is also, wait for it, folks, a psychologist. And Mary, just to set the table for those who don't know, we're recording this around 3:30 p.m.
Mhm.
Stock market not doing good.
Really?
Yeah, even the dog knows. He's like,
Yeah, well, that's why the dog barked, because
uh,
it's alarming.
yeah, it's alarming. Potential trade wars with our allies that might lead to a not just a recession now, a depression. Job loss. America lost 275,000 jobs, one of the worst in recent history, the largest since the 2001 and 2008 recessions. Tornadoes have killed a bunch of folks in America, central states. It might kill some more folks. That's in red counties. Measles is up. FDA, as of yesterday, is gutted. NIH gutted. Department of Education right now. I don't know if you saw the news that the Department of Education is now threatening public schools that we will take away your funding if you do DEI, which means, folks, by that definition, no teaching about, oh, I don't know, African American history, Civil War,
Or
people of
American
color,
history, for that matter.
American history. And with all that being said now, car prices are up, folks, because of this trade war. So if you were trying to buy a car, should have bought one on Tuesday. Um, Everyone's trying to figure out why. Why would Donald do this? Why? So much chaos. I give it to you.
Okay, well, first of all, it's so great to be here. I love doing lives, and it's very cool that we're doing our first one, and I expect there to be many more. You owe me now, so you're going to do a
Yeah.
lot of my Substack. But it's such a great way to connect with people that we don't usually get to reach. So hi guys. Uh,
And also, let me shamelessly promote Mary because I'm bad at promoting myself. Mary's even worse than me. Mary should have been born to South Asian immigrants because she is like, it's
Maybe
so
I
painful.
was.
It's so painful to it's so painful to see her trying to promote herself and just keep failing. It's endearing. But Mary Trump has the Mary Trump Substack, which you all need to subscribe to, and she also is not just the host of the Mary Trump Show. She's the founder of Mary Trump Media, which started about 7-8 months ago, and now has, last I checked, Mary, 370,000 subscribers.
But we're close. Yeah, yeah.
It's amazing.
Very exciting. It's very
It's
exciting.
and so she does like 1,000 shows. So on YouTube, subscribe to the Mary Trump Media and subscribe to her Substack. And Mary, take it away.
First of all, thank you. That's amazing, because I can't do that, as you know. I'll promote your stuff later. So I understand why people want to know why this is happening. A long time ago, well, not really, 4 years ago, which seems like a billion years ago. In 2020, my first book came out. It's called Too Much and Never Enough: How My Family Created the World's Most Dangerous Men. And the reason I wrote it was because I thought it was extraordinarily important for people to know everything about the guy who was running for reelection and understand in ways that I think a lot of people didn't yet, how dangerous he was. And the reason people didn't know was because I think there were maybe 5 people on the entire planet
Mm.
who knew the truth. And 4 of them, also related to me, didn't have the guts or were completely aligned with Donald, or, knew that everybody else in the family knew where the bodies were buried. So they weren't going to risk anything. I was completely outside of the family. I owed nobody anything. They had been incredibly disloyal to me. I owed them no loyalty, but it wasn't honest. It wasn't to get back at them. It's because it was my country at stake. It was our democracy that was at stake. And Waj, you as well as anybody and better than most, had been watching the trajectory
Yeah.
from 2016 on and knew, at least in a present sense, like in a way that he was demonstrating how bad things were and how bad things could get. but I had some insider information that I thought it was vital that I share. And as you mentioned, I'm also a clinical psychologist. So not only did I grow up with this guy, like he's my uncle. I've known him forever. He's my dad was the oldest son in the family, so he was 7.5 years older. So Donald was his younger brother. So Donald's my uncle. And having the training I have, I felt like I could connect dots for people.
Yeah.
So, as a psychologist and my training, I one of the things I did was diagnose patients. But that's a process. Like you can't just look at somebody and say, "Oh, they're narcissistic or they have depressive disorder." It's a very long technical process that requires a lot of training. So I had no interest in diagnosing him. Also, he could never be my patient because I'm related to him. But what I wanted to do was give people basically a psychological history of my family, including Donald's developmental history from a psychological perspective and how that fit in with the roles played by my grandfather, who was a sociopath, and my
Yeah.
dad, who was the namesake and heir to the empire, who was essentially destroyed by his family because he didn't fit the mold. Donald did. So, what did it cost Donald to be the person my grandfather was going to turn to? And Donald's motive there was not to be like my dad, not to be like Freddie, not to get killed off, literally. So,
Yeah.
he had a lot of incentives to be the worst version of who he was potentially. And we've seen over time that there's been deterioration. Like any potential good there may have been in this person is gone.
Yeah.
So, what are we dealing with now? I think the first thing we need to understand is what motivates Donald. And this is I'm not trying to make anybody feel compassionate for him because he's a monster and he's a responsible he has so much blood on his hands. I don't even think we can quantify it at this point, right? But as
And
a,
people who think that's an exaggeration, I'm glad you mentioned that because Donald in his first term knew how devastating COVID would be. We have the tapes from Bob Woodward. And folks, he lied. He deliberately lied to the American public for the sake of, excuse me, re-election.
right.
And people
Now,
died.
people died hundred. I think this is a conservative estimate. There were over four hundred
Yeah,
thousand unnecessary and preventable American deaths from COVID, and then you think how many international deaths based on the United States government's egregious and intentional mishandling of COVID, because as you mentioned, it was a political calculation for Donald.
that's right.
So that's who he is. But why? All right. Just since we're on that topic, one thing, if you want to be my grandfather, the sociopath's heir, you can never be wrong.
Mm,
You have to be a quote unquote killer, right?
mm,
And you have to be the best, the greatest, the whatever. That's why he speaks in hyperbole. He's always trying to convince himself that he is those things, even though he's none of them, which is why he's a scared little boy, because on a deep level, he knows he's none of them. But in terms of being wrong, like mature adult human beings, they look at where they're going. They're like, wait a minute, if I keep going down this path, I'm going to keep going in the wrong direction and it's going to keep getting worse. So what do? You stop. You course correct. That's what we call it. People like Donald call it being wrong, and you can't be wrong. So you keep doubling and quadrupling down on the wrong thing. It's so that's what he does. That's why COVID happened. That's why the tariff thing is happening, and it's only going to get worse. But getting back to the unconscious motivations here,
yeah.
this goes back to his very early development. The years like 1.5 to 3.5 are the most crucial developmental periods in a human being's life. Toddlerhood, essentially. So when Donald was around 2, my grandmother, his mom, became very ill. She became ill after the youngest child, Robert, was born, and Rob's about 1.5 years younger than Donald. And she essentially was gone for about a year. She had surgeries. So even when she was home, she was in pain. She was emotionally unavailable. She was physically unavailable. And to lose your primary caregiver at that age is devastating because nobody can explain to you what's going on. To make matters worse, the person replacing her was his dad, the sociopath, who had
Mm,
no interest in children whatsoever. The only thing my grandfather was interested at that time was his business and making money, and my dad, who was still the oldest son and meant to be the heir to the empire. My dad hadn't like ceded that yet. So Donald spends this critical developmental period alone, terrified, uncared for, uncomforted, and there's nobody there to mirror him. Now,
Mm.
mirroring is one of the most essential basic mechanisms that happens. It's a completely instinctive process. It's not like parents are like, "Oh, I need to mirror my child." No, it just happens instinctually. So a baby cries, gets comforted. Mirroring is essentially a way for adults to take in the child's emotions, process them, and give them back, so the child sort of starts to expand its awareness beyond itself and that dyad, right? And that's how you begin to understand the world. And a more basic way of understanding mirroring is it is the basis for empathy.
That's where I was getting at. It sounds like
Yes.
reciprocity, relationships, empathy, and
Yes.
sociopaths are unable to empathize.
Absolutely. And my grandfather had no empathy. And in fact, he liked one of his favorite things to do was humiliate people, especially my dad. So that's a bad start, first of all. Um, And then, because he was so terrified and alone at this time, he developed some defense mechanisms over the years. So by the time he was like 5 or 6, he was this belligerent, bullying, loud, aggressive kid that nobody liked. His siblings couldn't stand him, and like his favorite thing to do was to torture his little brother. And he wouldn't listen to anybody. He was really disobedient. He drove my grandmother up the wall, and that was allowed to go on. My grandfather worked all the time and he didn't care. Like, whatever, because Donald wasn't his problem. His only problem was Freddie. As they grow older, and I still do not understand why this happened, but at some point, by the time my dad was probably in high school or college, my grandfather's like, that's not my guy. I don't want it
Yeah,
to be Freddie. And Donald was probably in middle school. He was still having serious behavioral problems. He gets sent away to a military boarding school, which was basically a reform school for rich kids. And my grandfather starts paying attention to him. So, if after this very difficult developmental period, my grandmother had become more available to him, had been able to heal those wounds of separation, things
mm,
might have ended up differently. But she never did. And suddenly, my grandfather sees these qualities in Donald: the bullying, the belligerence, the always being right. And he's like, oh, wow, that might be my killer. So
there you
instead
go.
of overcoming these very negative defense mechanisms that would be, that in ways that matter to people like you and me, would have a negative impact on his life, Donald actually embraces them. They get stronger, they get validated. Okay, great. However, what does that mean? That means that after, having been so deprived as a young child, what Donald has always wanted most, always, and this is still true to this day, even though he can't recognize it, because if he did, he would probably just disintegrate. The thing he wants most is to be loved. He's
Yeah.
never been loved. What is the thing that my grandfather did to Donald? By preferencing him in the way he did, my grandfather made Donald unlovable.
Mm,
No matter what you
mm.
think about the guy, that is tragedy. And it's our tragedy now because that's what drives him. So, why is nothing ever enough? Because nothing can fill that massive void of never having been loved and never ever getting that one thing you most need.
No, I really appreciate that, Mary, and thank you for that insight. Thank you for revealing the family history. But what you just said right now reminds me of so many powerful people. I was talking to my friends about this. We talked about, I drive a minivan. I make my Lego sets. Life could have been better. I could have gone that opportunity, don't have the bigger house. But you know what? I love my wife. I love my kids. I'm happy. And then we're talking about some friends who have everything. They have everything except, wait for it, happiness. And then we talked about Elon Musk, a man who has everything, the richest man on earth. And what you just described, when you listen to Elon Musk talking about his parents, his upbringing, very similar. It was never enough. He said it was a very terrible time. He had a horrible, relationship with his father. He was never good enough. And the world's richest man, Elon Musk, still covets the applause, the
Yep.
love.
Yep.
And Donald, despite being the most powerful man on earth, he still needs to know that he had the bigger audience than Obama, that he had the bigger ratings, that, you know what, that trade war that is devastating, not just America, but folks all around the world. There's no reciprocal trades, folks. This is unilateral trade war started by the United States of America that is going to, God forbid, cause a global depression. He refuses to acknowledge it, Mary, and he says, nope, Liberation Day. And did you see his post today where he was giving himself a compliment? It's
Uh,
never enough.
about the patient? No, I don't.
Oh, no, he would just talk about I did it. It's finished. Liberation Day. It's over. It's accomplished. And we're
So
like, wait, what are you
embarrassing.
talking about?
It's so
And
embarrassing.
and so to me, he seems like a man with a carnal appetite that is never fulfilled.
Never. Never. Because it's the wrong thing. It's the wrong thing. And because it's always the wrong thing, there's not enough money, there's not enough power, there's not enough adulation, because adulation isn't love. His children don't love him. Every relationship this man has is transactional and empty.
Mm,
So that is now our problem. But what's worse, and again, guys, I am not saying feel compassion for him because he's a monster now. He's a monster. He deserves whatever is coming to him. But if you can just take a step back and look what happened to those 5 kids in that hideous house, it was just unspeakable. I mean, especially for my dad, but also for that kid who was Donald, right? But you know what? A lot of us have had horrific childhoods, and we don't turn out like this. We figure it out. We get therapy. We learn. We get self awareness. Whatever.
mm,
Donald never did because he kept being useful to smarter, more powerful people, which just again validated the ways in which he was awful and brought him far further and further away from that thing he most wanted. Now, the main problem aside from that now that we face is that for many reasons, Donald is a nihilist.
mm,
So every time he finally gets something and there's still a void, it makes him angry, like enraged, actually. So that triggers his nihilism. What that means basically is that Donald has the kind of narcissism that is based on a depth of insecurity that I can't fathom, quite honestly. So he literally does not believe that anything can exist beyond him. Now,
mm.
my grandfather was a sociopath, but he believed in his legacy. He wanted his empire to survive in perpetuity. Of course, my aunts and uncles sold it off like 5 minutes after my grandfather died. So much for that. Donald doesn't believe in legacy. He literally doesn't believe that anything can exist beyond him. And this is the dangerous part. If he feels like things are going south for him, if he feels like he's going down, he will bring everybody and everything down with him.
Yes, that's an important point. He's like it's the Solomon option, right? You're going to collapse the pillars and let the tower fall.
That's right.
And we're seeing it in real time, and folks who think that's exaggeration or that Mary's suffering from TDS, I give you the 2020 election. I give you the violent insurrection. I give you him pardoning the 1,600 violent insurrectionists. I give you the news item that I want to mention because people don't care. Last week he said he's open to compensating those people. I give you him torpedoing the US economy and then being surrounded by sycophants who are saying, you did a great job. He doesn't care. He probably has his crypto money. He has power. He has influence. He's 79, right? He's the oldest person ever to be elected by the time he leaves. Well, I don't think he's leaving, as I mentioned with Rick, I mentioned in
Nope.
your show. But
Nope.
can you talk to us about that? Because what that means for people, this type of personality that is willing to bring the earth down with him.
Yeah, well, it's a little terrifying But honestly, one thing we have going in his favor, in our favor, I should say, is that
Samson, sorry, someone corrected me. I meant the Samson option, not Solomon. Solomon,
oh, I thought I heard Simpson. I
the
corrected you
Samson
on
option.
his.
Thank you.
It's good to have people who are on top of this stuff because I just let it go entirely. Anyway, he is deteriorating, and that's good for us actually because
Mm,
I think it's easier. He kind of reminds me of my grandfather at this stage. My grandfather had very serious Alzheimer's, and I think his Alzheimer's maybe just started around in his late 70s, and he lived to be like almost 93. Sorry, guys. We are a
the
long-lived
worst
people.
people live forever.
You know what I say? Meanness is a preservative. That's what I say.
I give you Henry Kissinger.
Oh
Continue.
my God. Ay, ay, ay. Yeah, and my grandmother lived to be 89, so there you go. So he is, I mean, I'm not diagnosing him. I have no idea. What I do know about him is that he's a deeply unhealthy person, and he has had very serious, untreated psychiatric disorders for
Mm,
decades. And that's on top of he has a sleep disorder. I think he's addicted to caffeine because if anybody who drinks 12 Diet Cokes a day is addicted, he has a terrible diet. And potentially, people have made mention, not me, because I'm not a neuropsychologist or neurologist, that he seems to have some cognitive impairment that could be neurologically based, and Alzheimer's does run in my family. Okay. But he kind of does remind me of my grandfather a little bit. When my grandfather was older, he believed completely that he was still like king of the world. And he would just be he would be dressed up in his three-piece suit and driven into his office and sit behind his desk all day long thinking he's running everything. And he would just sign blank pieces of paper all day long.
wow.
And that's
Wow.
kind of what it feels like with the executive orders. And he's got so many people around him. Yeah, I mean the bad news is they're sort of protecting him from the reality of how horrible he is. But on the other hand, that kind of serves another purpose of protecting us from his recognizing to the degree that he might that he's absolutely a miserable failure and everything he's doing is wrong, stupid, misguided, and moronic. So,
And for those who might think, well, is Mary right about that? I truly believe he does not know about what happened on Signal. Uh, he was not part of the Signal chat. I am slightly terrified by the fact that the president of the United States had no idea that his Secretary of Defense and his national security advisor and the most important people on that team were planning military strikes. And of course, copy pasting the details of the military strike on an insecure app. Like he seems so far removed, even from the first administration, where Mary, if you remember, his executive schedule was watching TV for most of
yep.
the day. I'm not making that up. But
Executive
this,
time was
yeah,
built
no,
in.
really,
Yeah.
go check out those graphics, folks. It was pretty
Yep.
much him just watching TV
Yep.
because he used to sleep at 3 a.m. and just used to tweet, and now he's on Truth Social. This time he seems so checked out. Elon's kid is wiping boogers on the desk, telling him to shush. Laura Loomer, the news that we talked about briefly on your show today, uh, she advised Donald allegedly for 30 minutes. Laura Loomer, folks, is a fringe activist hate monger nut that was so nutty that even MAGA made fun of her in the first Trump administration.
Yep.
She talked to Donald for 30 minutes. He listened to her instead of everybody else and said, okay, I guess I gotta fire some folks. He fired the wrong people, didn't fire Hegseth or Waltz. But apparently he listened to her advice.
Yeah.
She said, you need to fire these three NSC folks because they're not America first. He goes, okay. I mean, that terrifies me, Mary.
Well, what should also terrify us, and I'm not saying it's worse, it's just qualitatively different, is that the commander in chief purportedly didn't know that 4 of our soldiers were missing near the Belarusian border. What? How? Excuse me? Like that is supposed to happen immediately, no matter what time of day or night. The ostensible commander in chief is supposed to know such things. And the fact that one, he didn't know, and two, he clearly didn't care because he had golf games to play.
Right.
That is also, I mean, I don't think he's has any ability to be in charge of anything anyway, even when he wasn't cognitively impaired. But And maybe it's better, but it's still inexcusable. And it just shows us how desperately irresponsible almost 74 million Americans were when they decided that we needed 4 more years of this absolutely monstrous traitor to this country.
And just because some people couldn't stand a black Indian woman getting that seat. Mary, I'm going to ask you one question, and on a hopeful note, I said this before on your show. I said this in my live with Rick Wilson. If I'm wrong, I want to be wrong. When I'm wrong in the past, I admit it. I'll eat the halal crow. With everything you've said about your uncle, with everything that we've seen for the past 10 years, I'm very confident in saying what I said in 2019, that he would not leave peacefully.
Hmm?
And he did. And when I said that, you, me, and a few others were mocked openly by those in the establishment, that centrists, corporate media, even some Republicans, even some liberals. Everything that you've said about your uncle, everything that I've seen, I do not think this man is leaving. I think he believes that that is his throne, that he will sit on it until death, and that his corpse should then stay on it for the rest of time, with him holding like a trident or maybe a cheeseburger. I don't know. Your take. I don't think people are prepared. And when people say it's a distraction, I'm like, you can, juggle. You could like walk and chew gum and whatever the analogy they say. We could take a few things but they're not looking at the big picture. This is an authoritarian regime, a man who will not leave, and a man who does not care about democracy, our freedoms, the economy, American people. He cares about power. He cares about being loved. He'll never be loved. He cares about lording over people. And he's going to stay there by any violent means necessary. Am I off? If I am, please tell me I'm wrong.
No, I am not going to
Damn it.
accommodate you. You're totally right. And we talked about this earlier. We all, you and I, and a few other people were saying the same thing, or different versions of the same thing. And I mean, before July 2020, I was saying it in the privacy of my own living room because nobody knew I existed. But after the summer of 2020, when my book came out, and I was very fortunate to be able to, do media and discuss these things from my perspective, I got asked questions like, it started with like, is he really racist? Did he really use the N word? I'm like, why are you? Of
Yes.
course he did. Like, what are you talking about? So as we got closer to the election, the questions were more like, if he loses, will he concede? No, no. After he lost, will he go to the inauguration? Are you? Of course he's not going to go to the inauguration because he's not conceding. And if he
Oh.
doesn't, if he's not admitting he lost, why would he go to the inauguration of the man he is going to claim? And this was before the election. The man he will claim stole the election for him. And I was also saying, as I'm sure you did as well, if he gets back into the White House, it will be the end of the American experiment.
Yeah.
I just didn't know it was going to take 4 years because I honestly didn't think there were so many traitorous idiots in the United States of America. All of that came true. He didn't concede the election. He and his team made a transition impossible. They hobbled the incoming Biden administration. They made it harder to administer COVID protocols. They messed with our national security. As we found out later, he stole highly classified documents. They were planning an insurrection, which we found out in November of 2024 was successful. On and on and on. Do we really expect that 4 years later, things aren't going to be anything but exponentially worse? Come on.
Folks, listen to Mary. She's been right. She's been right for 10 years. She knows this man. In addition to knowing him and surviving the family, she's a psychologist and very smart, as you can clearly see. Someone asked this question, Mary, in the comments. I'm trying my best to read. Thank you all for watching. 3,000 people. It's the most I've ever had. It's my third live Substack. If you think these are useful, let me know. I'm like this old man. I'm like, huh? The live Substack? What's that? So
What's
like
that button I'm supposed to press? I
I'm
don't
like,
know.
an app? Do I press this button? But thank you so much, Mary, for jumping on. But someone asked, okay, so now what do we do? And I believe, Mary, the MAGA coup was complete.
Yep.
I believe now we're in the regime
Yeah.
part of the story. People
Yep.
might not like hearing that. They succeed in
Good.
the coup. This
Yep.
is the Trump regime. It's an authoritarian regime. that does not care about our freedom, our democracy, our economy, that wants to serve Trump and the oligarchy, the 1% of the 1%. And they're willing to scorch earth. So someone asks, what do we do? And I say, and I believe you and me, we've had our challenges in life, but we still remain hopeful. We have children. We can't afford to be apathetic. We're still alive, and if you're still drawing a breath, that means you could still fight. I never bend the knee to a bully. You never bend the knee to a bully. For those asking, all right, Mary, what can we do? Your response to them.
There are many things, but the most important thing is take care of yourself. It is not worth it to sacrifice your mental health or your physical health for anything, because it just is going to make you less able to engage, right? And I mean, I hit a wall after the election, and I kept going, and I got really sick. So you don't want that to happen to you. Take time out as you can and as you need to. Also, community is vitally important. You need to be among like-minded people. You need
Right.
to be doing, even if it feels like a small thing, I promise you it's not. Working at the local level to make sure that we're getting school boards in our corner, that we're, state legislatures, et cetera, et cetera. In terms of the bigger picture, well, no, there's another. Well, I'll end with one other thing. But in the bigger picture, I do think, the problem right now is the Democratic Party does not have leaders. And that
That's
is,
right.
I honestly believe that the future leader of the Democratic Party is not going to be a politician. So we need to find, it doesn't have to be one person, it could be several people. We need leaders, and we need to start organizing, and we need to start mass protesting. I think ultimately what's going to have to happen, because it will be less dangerous than protesting, because these guys are itching to invoke martial law, is we're going to have to shut everything down.
Can you
And
say that
that's,
last part again? Because when I say it, people think I'm cray. Can you just say that last part again?
we are going to have to shut everything down.
And the
Everything.
martial law part.
Oh, the marshal. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys. I mean, I think you said this earlier today on the Nerds. Um, One of the reasons Donald isn't, I mean, there are many reasons he's not going to leave, but one of the mechanisms he's going to use to make sure he doesn't have to leave in 2028 is he's going to declare some kind of national emergency, and he's going to
Yep.
cancel the elections. And whether that's martial law or whatever, I don't know. But in the meantime, like if there are massive protests, I mean, we need protests so massive that this can happen, but America seems incapable of doing what other countries do all the time. Oh well. So I think we have to be worried that he will use any excuse to basically to cancel out that part of the First Amendment that allows for peaceful protests and assembly, and invoke martial law. And that, so we have to be careful and very well considered about how we do that. But I think a potentially safer and even more effective option, and this is all going to take massive amounts of organization, is just shutting it down. That means, no shopping, not going to work, et cetera, to the extent that that's possible. And again, I mean, I'm just spitballing because I don't know. We've never dealt with this situation before, but we're going to have to figure out something creative and different and potentially subversive, because we are living in very dangerous times that are unfamiliar to most of us.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to require sacrifices many of us never imagined having to make, which is scary. I know it's scary, and it's okay to be scared. It's ridiculous not to be. We should be scared, but that doesn't mean we get paralyzed. And one of
That's
the
right.
other things that is incredibly important, and to me, this is what keeps me going, and you and the rest of the nerds give this to me all the time. We have to have hope. This
Right.
this is not sustainable, and it will not last. And we just need to make sure that as many of us as possible are still around when we finally get back our country.
Amen. Beautifully said, Marion. I want to end with this. People don't know, yeah, I'm going to compliment you, so you're going to be very awkward and shift like I do.
Sure.
People assume, and I've had these conversations because I've been appearing on Nerd Avengers for a while, and they know that I know you. Oh, Mary, she's rich because she's a Trump. Oh, Mary, she has a gilded life. And what people don't know is by speaking out, by being one of the few people with this knowledge of Donald, speaking out, writing that book, being so open, blunt, aggressive in the resistance for the past 10 years, Mary has lost a lot. She's being sued by Donald. She's not made of money. Her health has taken like just a beating, right? Mental health, physical health, the stress. And so, Mary does this at great cost. And not just that, folks. Imagine having that name Trump and then being one person of that family who's not a sycophant, who speaks out. Well, guess what? You got a target on your front and on your back for the past 10 years. So Mary takes it, and even though it's a lot, but she still gets up, even after, in our age, it's okay to take a seat once in a while. She brushes it off, and she has built, through blood, sweat, grit, tears, and hope, Mary Trump Media. It's at Mary Trump Media on YouTube. It has 363,000 subscribers. I was there when it started with nothing. I was there when she's like, "Do you think I should do this?" And that
That's
was last
nice.
summer. And she's at 363,000. So on YouTube, go at Mary Trump Media and please subscribe. Subscribing and liking, YouTube has this weird algorithm, folks. The elves, the way it works, it goes a long way. And people think Mary has the money. Nope. She's like us. She's grassroots, independent. So on Substack, Mary Trump Substack, she's using that as a major vehicle for speaking out, for building this community. Please go subscribe to that Substack. I know times are tough. If you can, pay for that Substack. How much does it cost per month, Mary?
It costs nothing.
Oh, you and me are idiots. I forgot. We're
Yeah,
the my
we're brilliant capitalists, is what we are.
my dad is watching this right now, and my mom is watching. My mom's at home from work. And my dad, for the past 2 weeks, every day he calls me. He goes, "Beta," which means son. Please charge something on Substack.
Okay,
My
well, as
mom
his parents, I'm so sorry. You were probably hoping I was going to be a better example. I
My
failed.
my
I'm
mom
sorry.
joined yesterday. My mom joined yesterday on the call as my daddy goes, "How can you be my son, a child of immigrants and not charge?" And my mom's like, "Beta, I was reading in the New York Times. Even Don Lemon and Jim Acosta are charging. They're much bigger than you. What's wrong with you?"
Wait a second, though. The truth of the matter is, it's free to subscribe. However, there is a paid option if you think it's worth it, and hopefully you do, because it helps. One, it helps us, and it helps us grow because we're independent media, and that matters a lot. And two, it helps us like gift free subscriptions to people who are
There you
senior
go.
citizens, or on a fixed income, or students, or what have you, and that's really nice to do as well. And just one quick thing, I just obviously, we've been growing, and it's been a phenomenal experience. It's been a lot of work, but I could not have done it without Waj and my other nerd adventures, who have been with me for over 2 years now.
No, no, it was a pleasure. And we're just terrible capitalists. And you know what's worse? We actually know how to make money, but we choose not to, which is
Yeah.
we're just idiots. But in all seriousness, the reason why, much like Mary, I've kept a payment option. It's if you want, please do subscribe to the Left Hook Substack. I started a few months ago. I've kept it super cheap and honored reaching 50,000 subscribers. I even made it less. It's like $4 a month.
Stop
Uh,
it. No, no, no. Stop that. That's ridiculous. Stop that right now.
you know why? The reason for this is the following: democracy dies in darkness. Remember that Washington Post? But
Yeah, and it was
democracy,
true.
as we've seen in this election, people who were misinformed about facts, folks, they went for Donald. The people
That's
who had the correct information about the economy, about inflation, about healthcare, who they go for? Kamala Harris. People are confused. They don't have the right information. They don't trust institutions. And with this economy going south, spending $4 and $5 for some people, it's a lot, or $10. So I'm cognizant of that, and Mary's cognizant of that, which is why we, like fools that we are, and terrible capitalists, have kept no paywalls. As you're facing fascism, folks, I really believe as a principle people must be informed. So I think during fascism, and I call it the F word, it's a fascist regime, folks. I believe all this information, this content that you're seeing right now for the past 30 minutes, 3,500 of you, thank you. That's Mary's drawing power. I believe it should be free. But if you can, subscribe to Mary Trump Media on YouTube, Mary Trump Substack, and if you can, to the Left Hook. Thank you, Mary, for joining at the last second. I kept you longer, but it was such a fascinating conversation. And the community below, if you're seeing the comments, you're getting a lot of love. And you have shamelessly promote yourself because you have another show. Do it. Tell it. Tell them tonight. Where can they find you?
Monday through Friday, thank you. At 6 p.m. Eastern every night, I have Mary Trump Live on Mary Trump Media Channel on YouTube. Check it out. It's really fun, and it would be great to have you guys there and watch. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks to everybody for your amazing comments and for being here. We really, really, really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll do it again soon.
Everyone, take care of yourself, be kind to others, and please, oh, please, just don't be a fascist.
Please don't. It's not that hard.
It's
Bye.
not that hard. Take care.